Hello and welcome to this quick overview of the Azure Arc opportunity for SPLA partners, helping you save cost, improve your SQL estate management and security through the Azure Arc technology. My name is Darren Climie-Newman. I'm an Azure commercial lead for TD SYNNEX's Microsoft team in Europe. So what would you say if SPLA partners could license SQL through the Azure CSP program? What would you say if you as a SPLA partner could save money on SQL through Azure CSP? Does that sound interesting? So back in December, Microsoft announced through a blog post that they are enabling what is known as pay-as-you-go SQL. Okay, the link here is freely available and publicly. The local TD SYNNEX team can share that with you for more information. But as you can clearly see here, if you are a service provider, license agreement partner offering SQL Server to customers and using the core licensing model, keep reading to learn more on cost savings and the opportunity to follow. So I'm going to go through some of that information for you now so that you can get an idea of how we as TD SYNNEX can help you save on your SQL costs. So Azure Arc has a number of different functionalities within the technology, but the main key one that's been announced in the last few weeks is SQL Server licensing on demand. That's for both SQL Server Enterprise Edition and SQL Server Standard Edition. Okay, other key benefits of Azure Arc is you can manage your entire SQL estate through the Azure portal and Azure Arc technology. You can control and govern your entire data estate, and you can also secure and improve data security using the Azure security of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You can also get extended security updates. So if you're still working with SQL Server 2012 or potentially 2014, which becomes end of support in July this year. So there are a number of different sales motions and key scenarios that Azure Arc can support and enable. And the key one we're going to look at today briefly is the Azure Arc enabled SQL. So as I mentioned, you can now get a cloud billing model for SQL Server, which is essentially pay-as-you-go. So SQL Server pay-as-you-go licensing enabled through Azure Arc is a per core, per month, per hour pricing model. And you can see here that the standard edition is $74 per core per month, and the enterprise edition is $279 per core per month. You still have to follow the SQL licensing terms, which is a minimum of 4 cores. Again, the benefits are optimizing asset capitalization, optimizing upfront costs. Again, pay as you go enables you to pay for what you use. So if you have SQL servers that can be turned off overnight or during weekends, or even during periods when it's just not needed at all, you don't pay for it. Okay, whereas SQL through any other licensing program, you have to pay for it and you are paying for the full use of that license, regardless of whether you're using the technology or the server. So when you deploy Azure Arc, you can now select 2 different licensing types. You can select the traditional software assurance or SQL subscription through CSP, and then that will just provide a license usage in cost management in Azure and a billing via a distinct $0 meter. So you're not charged because you've already paid for the license, or you now have the pay-as-you-go option, which triggers a pay-as-you-go hourly billing for SQL when the server is connected. Another benefit is what is known as best practices assessment for Azure Arc enabled SQL. So it can help you evaluate your configuration of SQL Server. So from security and compliance, availability and business continuity, performance and scalability, operations, security, Azure policy, etc., and many other. So you're now getting the benefit of some of the Azure cloud capabilities down to your on-premises SQL instances. That could be inside your customers' environments or in your SPLA hosted data center environments. So key message here is that we can help you reduce SQL costs and add value to new and existing servers. Okay, so key messages here from Microsoft is that convert your SPLA to Arc-enabled SQL and save up to 30%, including incentives through the CSP program. Also position Arc instead of SPLA if you have new customers looking to onboard, or instead of replacing it with a CSP server subscription through the CSP program. And one of the key things you may be thinking is, what is the catch, or what are the licensing terms? Because we always have to be careful on how Microsoft allow us usage of their software. So to be really clear, as you can see at the very bottom, purchase SQL Server through Arc allows the customer to pay for SQL licenses in a true cloud consumption model, regardless of where SQL Server is installed and deployed. So this is about a licensing change from SPLA to Azure Arc-enabled SQL. So the big question is, do the maths work? Does this make sense for you to change the way you license SQL within your data center? We'll quickly talk through that over the next 2 slides. So as an example, the average price of a SQL standard 2-core license on SPLA is around 156 euros. The cost of Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server standard 2 cores on pay-as-you-go through the CSP program, from the Azure pricing calculator, you can see that it's 137 euros. It's already 19 euros cheaper just at the MSRP price. If we look at enterprise, the average cost of enterprise 2-core on SPLA is around 590 euros, and the cost of Azure Arc-enabled SQL enterprise 2-core pay-as-you-go through Azure CSP from the Azure pricing calculator, you can see is 514. Again, already 76 euros cheaper, just purely at MSRP pricing. Then, of course, through the CSP program, you can earn a CSP discount, also known as partner-owned credit, and you can also receive a 4% rebate through the Modern Commerce Incentive Program, and also take advantage of the new 15% rebate on a new customer ad incentive. So if the customer that you are hosting for isn't using Azure and you move them to SQL licensing through Azure Arc, that would be a new customer to Azure for Microsoft, and you are entitled to 15% back-end rebate on that Azure consumption. So you can see there's up to 30% of profitability and cost savings available by moving your SQL licenses to Azure Arc SQL. So again, just to recap, this is a licensing change. That's purely what we're here to talk about, but also how we can help you save cost. So with Azure Arc, partners can license their customers' new and existing SQL servers anywhere on any cloud. That includes your private cloud services that you may host for your customers. Okay, huge cost savings opportunity specifically for SPLA partners. And just to be really clear, the licensing of SQL Server Anywhere and simplify license management with a modern cloud billing model, pay by the hour. So on top of the SPLA and Azure Arc, what we would like to call the Spark opportunity, you get additional benefits through the Azure Arc technology. That includes, as I mentioned earlier, SQL Best Practice Analyzer. You can also get some of the purview access policies, so to provide security around data management. It's enabled through Microsoft Defender for Cloud for SQL Server. So you're now using some of the Azure's advanced security capabilities to protect your customers' SQL environments. You can then manage your SQL estate at scale from a single point of control, the Azure portal through the Azure Arc Blade. You've got the best practices assessment, which I talked about. So again, ensuring that you're running your SQL instances to the best practices and efficiently for your customers. We've already talked about the key message here, which is the pay-as-you-go SQL. So you're paying for SQL licensing on a pay-as-you-go basis. If you're not connecting your server to Azure Arc or it's turned off, you don't pay for that licensing. And then critically, if you are still running some end of support SQL servers, namely 2012 and 2012 R2, then of course you can get extended security updates through Azure Arc as well. Not to mention, while still in support today, SQL Server 2014 does go end of support on the 9th of July this year. There will be extended security updates available for 2014, again, can be enabled through Azure Arc. From a licensing standpoint, you can see here that the pay-as-you-go licensing is the same as a license with software assurance or a CSP subscription. It's no different. It's just a licensing change. It's exactly the same license, the same product, and the same server. There are a number of resources that the local CSP team can provide you. There's the link here to the Microsoft Learn or documentation. There's the feature availability details that I just briefly shared. And then obviously there is a link to some details directly from Microsoft on the incentives, opportunity, and potential savings. So the call to action is please speak to your local TD SYNNEX CSP team for more information on how to save costs on your SQL licensing instead of SPLA. Thanks very much.